The little girl knocked on my door. Nobody wants my mom. Do you want her? Her mother was mortified. Jonas Reed had one knee on the floor and both hands inside a pressure door housing when someone knocked on the door he was repairing. 3 small taps. He pulled his head out of the access panel. The service corridor beyond his workshop stood empty at first glance. Then he looked down. A little Tavren girl stood on the brass threshold strip. She wore an oversized brown coat, soft boots, and a cloth satchel almost as wide as her shoulders. Pale copper markings ran from the corners of her eyes toward her temples, her ears angled backward with concentration. Jonas set the screwdriver beside his knee. "Can I help you?" The girl looked over her shoulder. A woman was hurrying toward them. She was tall, thin, and dressed in a plain gray work coat that had been repaired at both elbows. Her dark hair was tied too tightly behind her head. One hand gripped a folder. The other reached toward the girl. "Mira," the child turned back to Jonas. "Nobody wants my mom." The woman stopped. Jonas did too. Mira pointed behind herself. "Do you want her?" Her mother's face changed so completely that Jonas almost looked away out of courtesy. "Mira. What? You cannot ask people that, but they keep saying no." The woman closed her eyes. "Myra." The girl's shoulders dropped. Jonas looked between them. He had repaired doors in government towers, storage vaults, residential blocks, refugee dormitories, and once a music hall whose owner had insisted the problem was ghosts. He had never been asked to take responsibility for somebody's mother. He rested an arm on his raised knee. "What does she think I'm supposed to want you for?" The woman opened her eyes. Her embarrassment sharpened. "My daughter misunderstands certain phrases. I don't, you do. They said they did not want you. They said they did not require my services. That means they didn't want you." Jonas hid the beginning of a smile by looking down at the threshold. Mira saw it anyway. Her expression brightened. Her mother's did not. "I apologize," the woman said. "We should go." She caught Mira gently by the shoulder and turned her. The pressure door behind Jonas gave a faint metallic tremor. The Tavren woman stopped walking, her head tilted. Jonas noticed. The vibration came again, soft. Uneven, the woman looked back at the door. Jonas watched her eyes move from the upper hinge housing to the left compression seam. "You heard that?" She hesitated. "Yes, what did you hear? I really should leave. What did you hear?" Her gaze returned to the seam. "The upper frame is not your problem." Jonas glanced at the open housing. "That's inconvenient. The lower retaining strip is expanding against the channel." He looked toward the floor. The strip was the part he had just replaced. "It's new. That does not mean it fits." Jonas stood. Mira looked from him to her mother. Her mother tightened her hold on the folder. Jonas tapped the brass threshold with one boot. "Where?" The woman said nothing. He handed her a stick of graphite inspection chalk. Her eyes dropped to it. "I am not certified for this building. I'm asking where you heard the strain. That is still work. I didn't say I'd pay you." That surprised a laugh out of Mira. Her mother looked horrified again. Jonas lifted the chalk slightly. "You can also tell me to solve my own door." The woman stared at him. Then at the threshold, she finally took the chalk. Her fingers were long, with darkened pads at the tips. Instead of crouching immediately, she stood still, listening. A cart rolled somewhere 2 corridors away. A ventilation unit cycled. The door behind Jonas gave another faint shudder. The woman knelt. She touched 2 fingers to the brass, not the center. The far left corner, she drew a short graphite mark. There, Jonas crouched beside her. "That little?" The strip is pressing sideways before the lock seats. He reached for a thin metal gauge. She shook her head. "Close it first." Jonas did. The pressure door slid into place. A low hum passed through the frame. The woman's attention shifted, not to the door. To Mira. The child had wandered 3 steps away to study Jonas's tray of screws. The woman's eyes followed her for half a second, then returned to the threshold. Jonas noticed. So did the woman. Her jaw tightened, as though she expected criticism. Jonas opened the door again. Still left corner. Yes. He removed 2 screws and loosened the strip. A slight curve lifted from the channel. He stared at it. The woman had been right. Mira leaned over his shoulder. My mom hears buildings. Mira, she does. Jonas slid a shim beneath the corner. Useful talent. The woman folded her arms. Apparently not. Jonas looked up. That answer carried more weight than the words required. He finished the adjustment, tightened the strip, and cycled the door. The vibration disappeared. Mira clapped once. Her mother did not. She was staring at the brass strip as if she regretted touching it. Jonas placed the chalk back in its tray. What's your name, Avelren? Jonas Reed. I know. That's alarming. Myra pointed at the wall outside. Your name is on the repair plate. Jonas followed her finger. Less alarming. Avel held out the folder. I apologize again. You already did. She should not have disturbed you. She knocked. She asked whether you wanted me. That was unusual. Myra frowned. You still didn't answer. Avel made a sound somewhere between a cough and surrender. Jonas looked at the child, then at Avel. I don't know your mother. Mira's face fell. But Jonas added, I have 7 more doors in this corridor making noises they shouldn't make. Avel stared at him. Jonas nodded toward the chalk. If she wants to tell me where they're failing, I'll listen. Avel's expression became guarded. You are offering work. I'm offering 1 door. Why? Because you found the problem in mine. That does not mean I'm qualified. No, it means you found the problem in mine. Myra tugged her mother's sleeve. Mom, Avel did not move. Jonas went back into the workshop. He set another shim into the shallow tray. Behind him, mother and daughter whispered. He deliberately did not listen. A minute later, small boots crossed the brass threshold, then larger ones. Avel stopped beside the damaged second door. I'm not accepting charity. Jonas picked up his gauge. Good. Charity would be terrible at fixing pressure seals. She looked at him. For the first time, the embarrassment faded enough for something firmer to appear underneath. Close the door. He did. Avel placed her fingertips against the frame. Mira sat on Jonas's repair stool. Nobody spoke. The door hummed. Avel listened. Then she reached for the graphite chalk. The next morning, Jonas arrived at his workshop to find a small cloth satchel hanging from the door handle. Mira sat on the floor beneath it. Avel stood beside her. Jonas checked the corridor clock. You're early. Avel looked uncomfortable. You did not give us a time, so you chose before sunrise. We were awake. Mira raised both hands. I was awake. Jonas unlocked the workshop. What's in the bag? Breakfast. Is it dangerous? Myra considered this. Probably not, Avel sighed. Jonas stepped aside. They entered. The workshop was narrow enough that 3 people had to negotiate around each other carefully. Tools hung on 2 walls. Repair plates occupied a third. A tea dispenser sat in the corner beside a floor drain that had never once drained anything Jonas wanted it to. On the wall beside the door were 2 small hooks. One held Jonas's brass work token. The other was empty. Mira noticed it. What's that one for? People who work with me. You have no people. Jonas looked at Avel. Your daughter is cruel. She is observant. Mira pointed at the second hook. Mom can have that? Avel immediately said no. Jonas opened a cabinet. It's a hook. It implies employment. It mostly implies I once bought 2 hooks. Myra appeared unconvinced. Jonas removed a temporary visitor token and placed it on the table instead. There. Nobody has to commit to architecture. Avel gave him a strange look. What? Nothing. He handed her the day's maintenance list. 8 pressure doors, 3 ordinary inspections, 2 frame distortions, 1 lock misalignment, 2 reported vibrations. Avel read every line. Which one first? Jonas pointed toward the corridor. The one everybody says is fine. She followed him. The door belonged to a residential archive. Its sensors had passed 3 automated checks. Avel stood before it. Cycle it. Jonas pressed the control. The door opened, closed, opened, closed. Avel touched the frame. Mira stood behind the brass safety line. Avel's eyes flicked toward her, then back. Jonas pretended not to notice. Again, he cycled it. Her fingers shifted lower. Again. On the 4th cycle, she marked a spot with graphite. Jonas checked it. The gauge showed nothing unusual. He checked again. Still nothing. Avel withdrew her hand. You think I'm wrong. I think my gauge thinks you're wrong. The gauge is measuring pressure after closure. Yes, I'm listening during compression. Jonas studied the door. What difference? The frame twists before it settles. He loosened the panel. Nothing obvious. Avil waited. Jonas removed another plate. A retaining screw had carved a bright crescent into the channel. It was shifting under load. He whistled. Mira smiled proudly. Avil did not. You should replace the screw and inspect the neighboring fastener. Jonas did. By midday, she had found 2 faults he had missed. By evening, Jonas had found one she had missed. Avil looked almost pleased by that. You expected me to be offended, Jonas said. No, you did. I expected you to mention it. I'm mentioning it. That is different. How? You're not using it as proof. Proof of what? Avil looked toward Mira. The girl was drawing little rectangles on a scrap of inspection paper, doors. Everyone had a tiny person standing beside it. Avil lowered her voice. That I cannot do this anymore. Jonas leaned back against the wall. Who says that? Avil handed him the folder she had carried the day before. He opened it. The first page was a Crown Residential Standards assessment. The second was a refusal. The third was another refusal. Then another. Jonas stopped counting after 9. Most used similar language. Unsuitable for precision work. Attention instability. Excessive dependent awareness. Contextual distraction risk. He looked up. Avil stood very straight. Mira said nobody wants you. She exaggerates. Jonas glanced at the stack. Not by much. Avil looked away. I was employed in the Eastern Royal Nursery Wing before Mira was born. Jonas looked again at the assessment. Royal Service, Environmental SEAL Attendant. That's not an easy credential to get. It was not. What happened? Avil took the folder back. There was an evacuation drill. Jonas waited. She continued. I stopped a pressure cycle because one of the nursery children had entered an adjoining room. That sounds reasonable? The child was behind 2 safety partitions. You knew that. Yes, you still stopped? Avil nodded. Tavren, do not stop tracking our children simply because another task has begun. That seems useful. Not according to the Crown assessment. Did you make mistakes? Not then? Later? No. Any accidents? No. Failed inspections? No. Then what exactly were they? The evaluator wrote that my attention could not remain isolated from nearby juveniles. Jonas glanced toward Mira. Avil saw him. There, what? What did I do? You looked at her. So did you. Exactly. Jonas crossed his arms. Avil's voice grew quieter.
Measuring.
Avil's mouth tightened. My ability to behave as though Mira did not exist while I worked. Jonas looked at the folder again. That was not how the document described it. But once he saw it, he could not stop seeing it. Every criticism assumed concentration meant exclusion. One task, one input, one focus. Avil worked differently. She listened to the door, the corridor, Jonas, Mira, all of it. The standards called that distraction. The doors seemed to disagree. Jonas took out his wall ledger. He drew 2 columns. Avil watched. What are you doing? Keeping notes about me? About the doors. He wrote, automated reading, acceptable. Avil warning, frame twist during compression. Manual inspection confirmed. Then he drew another line. Why? Because if I tell someone you were right, that's an opinion. He tapped the ledger. If the hardware tells them, it's maintenance. Myra looked up from her drawing. Can Mom have the hook now? Avil answered before Jonas could. No, Jonas returned to work. But that evening, when Avil and Mira left, the temporary visitor token stayed on the table instead of going back into the drawer. The routine lasted 11 days. Jonas listened. Avil marked. He loosened. She checked. He shimmed. They closed the door, then both listened again. Mira appointed herself official counter. 1 repaired seam earned 1 tap on the brass threshold. 2 seams, 2 taps. On the 7th day, she became confused because 1 door required 5 corrections but only 1 actual repair. She invented half taps. Jonas banned them. Mira appealed. Avil supported the ban. Mira accused them of forming a government. On the 9th day, Avil laughed. It was not loud. Jonas almost missed it. Mira did not. She stared at her mother. Avil immediately returned to the repair plate. What? You laughed? I did not. You did. Your counting system remains unacceptable. That was a laugh. Jonas kept his eyes on the screw he was tightening. Sounded like a cough. Myra gasped.
You're helping her? I'm repairing a door. Traitor, Avel's shoulders moved again. This time Jonas heard it. So did Mira. The girl touched the brass threshold twice, for 2 laughs. No half taps and no laugh taps, Jonas said.
You make too many laws. But Mira was smiling. The routine changed after that. Not dramatically. Avel still arrived early, still refused the hook, still checked every payment receipt twice. Still left Mira's satchel under Jonas's workbench because it was the only place in the workshop nobody tripped over it. But she stopped standing near the exit. She began setting out her own shims. She knew which tea Jonas hated. She learned which doors he distrusted. Jonas learned that she could hear a warped compression strip before his handheld meter registered a meaningful deviation. He also learned that she was not always right. That mattered. Perfect people made terrible evidence. Real competence had edges. Some days Jonas caught the fault first, some days Avel did. Some days they both stared at the same door until Mira announced that it sounded exactly like a door and suggested lunch. Jonas documented everything. By the 12th day, his ledger held 27 comparisons. Avel predicted 11 concealed faults before instruments flagged them. Jonas predicted 9. 7 were obvious to both. None of Avel's warnings had produced a false safety shutdown. Jonas showed her the numbers. She stared at them. What do you want me to say? That I should improve my hearing, she looked up. You are serious. Painfully, Avel touched the ledger. You kept all this. You kept getting things right. That is not what the Crown report says. No, she became still. Jonas knew that stillness by then. It meant something inside her had tightened. He closed the ledger. You want recertification? Avel's hand left the page. No, Mira, sitting beneath the workbench, said yes. Avel looked down. Mira, you do. That is not your decision, I know. The girl returned to arranging washers by size. Avel looked at Jonas. I have been assessed 4 times, using the same procedure. Yes, then you haven't been assessed 4 times. Her expression sharpened. You have been given the same test 4 times. Avel looked toward the open workshop door. The empty hook remained beside Jonas's token. I know what happens, she said. Jonas said nothing. They move Myra behind a screened partition. Then they increase environmental noise. Then they require continuous seal calibration while observers enter and leave. Sounds unpleasant. It is supposed to be. Why? To measure whether I maintain exclusive concentration. Jonas leaned against the bench. And you don't? No, because you know where Mira is. Yes, and whether somebody enters the room. Yes, and whether the door changes pitch. Yes, and you still complete the repair. Yes, Jonas spread his hands. I'm struggling to identify the defect. Avel looked almost angry. You are not the one whose signature matters. No, you can believe me and nothing changes. That landed harder than Jonas expected. He looked at the ledger. She was right. His workshop had become comfortable, useful, safe, but comfort was not a credential. If he did nothing, Avel would remain a woman working unofficially beside a human repairer because official doors were closed to her. Mira's first question would remain true. Nobody wanted her mother, not on paper. Jonas turned the ledger toward himself. Then we make my signature matter less. Avel frowned. How? We submit the doors. She stared at him, all of them. All the repairs you diagnosed before my instruments did. To Crown standards. Yes, Avel took a step back. Mira stopped sorting washers. Jonas continued carefully. Not a complaint, Avel said nothing. A maintenance variance request. They have to inspect physical outcomes. They will see my name. Yes. They will reopen the assessment. Probably? I said no. Jonas nodded. Mira looked at him. He closed the ledger. Then no. Avel blinked. That's all? That's all? You are not going to persuade me? No, but you think I should? Yes. Avel waited. Jonas returned the ledger to its hook. You still get to say no. The workshop became quiet. Avel looked at Mira, then at the empty token hook, then at the repair corridor outside. I want one condition. Jonas waited. If they test me again, you do not argue the result for me. He frowned. Why? Because if you have to defend me through the entire process, they will say I function only because you accommodate me. Jonas considered it. That sounds like them. I need the work to survive without your explanation. He nodded. Fine. Avel drew a breath. Submit it. Mira scrambled out from under the bench. Does Mom get the hook? Avel pointed toward the corridor. Go wash your hands. That means yes. It means your hands are black. Mira ran toward the wash alcove. Jonas opened the ledger. Avel stopped him. Jonas. He looked up. Thank you. He shook his head. Wait until they say yes. Avel's expression softened. No, she tapped the ledger. For believing the door before the report. Then she went to wash graphite from her hands. Inspector Salvaro arrived 3 days later. He was Tavren. That surprised Jonas. He had expected a human or one of the Crown's administrative species. Sel wore a blue-gray standards coat with silver edge stitching and carried no visible tools. His ears angled forward when he entered the workshop. Mr. Reed? Unfortunately, Sel did not react. Avel ran. Avel stepped forward. Mira sat on the repair stool. Sel looked at the girl, then at Avel. The movement was tiny. Jonas saw Avel notice it. Sel opened his tablet. I reviewed the submitted maintenance variances. Jonas waited. 27 comparisons. Yes. 11 claimed pre-instrument detections. Confirmed after manual inspection. Sel looked at Avel, and all occurred while the juvenile was present. Mira frowned. Avel answered. Yes, Sel made a note. Jonas almost laughed. Of course that was what interested him. Sel walked to the nearest repaired door. Show me Avel did. No speech. No defense. She placed her fingers against the frame. Jonas cycled the door. Sel watched. Mira shifted on the stool. Avel's eyes flicked toward her, then returned to the frame. Sel noticed again. Avel marked a point. Jonas opened the panel. The repair remained stable. Sel inspected the hardware. You are competent in this environment, he said. Avel's shoulders tightened. Jonas heard the trap before the rest arrived. Sel continued. However, Mr. Reed's workshop is informal, familiar, and adapted to your behavior. Avel said nothing. The evidence may demonstrate successful accommodation rather than transferable competence. Jonas looked at the ledger. There it was. The old model bending around new evidence instead of breaking. Sel turned to Jonas. You allow the child unrestricted proximity. Yes, you pause work when necessary. Yes, you permit non-standard sequencing. When the door doesn't care, neither do I. Sel ignored that. You therefore remove several stressors included in Crown certification. Avel spoke. Do you believe the repairs are unsafe? No. Do you believe my diagnoses were fabricated? No. Do you believe Jonas performed them for me? No. Then what exactly has failed? Sel's expression remained calm. The test is not whether you can work here. Avel's ears angled backward. It is whether you can work anywhere. Jonas disliked the sentence because it sounded reasonable. That was what made it dangerous. Sel set his tablet down. I am authorizing one contextual review. Avel went still. Mira slid off the stool. Sel continued. Crown Passage 14. Live cycling, multiple doors, standard pedestrian movement. Avel waited. Mira will remain outside the immediate certification zone. The child looked up. No, Avel closed her eyes. Sel looked at Mira. It is not a punishment. No, Mira. The girl stepped closer to her mother. They always put me away and then say she's wrong because she knows where I am. Sel's face changed slightly, not enough, but slightly. Avel crouched in front of her daughter. You will not be put away, but you will stand behind the marked line. You will see me. Myra's eyes filled with worry. Jonas stayed where he was. This was not his choice. Avel touched Mira's cheek. I need to do this. Why? Avel looked at the empty hook by Jonas's door, then back to her daughter. Because I want my own door. Mira stared at her. Jonas looked away. That sentence hurt in a way he had not expected. Mira finally nodded. One tap when you're done. Avel smiled. One Sel collected his tablet. The test begins tomorrow. He left. Jonas waited until the corridor was empty. Then he said, I can withdraw the request. Avel stood. No, you don't have to prove anything to me. I know that's not what I said. I know that too. She picked up the graphite chalk. Her hands trembled slightly. Jonas pretended not to notice. Avel looked at him. "You promised not to argue the result from me." "I remember. You can still document the doors." "I was planning to document the walls if necessary." That earned the smallest smile. Mira climbed onto the repair stool. "Mom?" "Yes. When they want you tomorrow, do I get the hook?" Avel looked at Jonas. Jonas looked at the hook. Avel shook her head. "Not yet." Mira groaned. Jonas went back to work. But that evening, after they left, he polished the empty hook with the edge of his sleeve. He felt foolish immediately. So he polished the other one too. Crown Passage 14 contained 6 pressure doors in a straight line. Too clean, too bright, too official. Jonas hated it at once. Avel stood inside the marked work zone. Mira stood behind a silver floor line 20 paces away. Cell occupied the control station with 2 technical observers. Jonas had been permitted to bring his maintenance ledger, nothing else. Avel carried no special equipment, only standard Crown tools. Cell activated the first sequence. Door 1 cycled. Avel inspected it. Passed. Door 2. Passed. Door 3 had a slight upper drag. Avel adjusted it. The Crown sensor approved. The observers recorded the result. Mira remained silent. People began moving through the passage as part of the live context test. A courier, 2 attendants, a sanitation cart, a pair of guards. Avel's eyes moved. Door people. Mira, tools door. Jonas watched Cell watching her. He could almost see the old assessment rewriting itself in the inspector's head. Distracted, divided, unsafe. Door 4 cycled. Avel stopped. Cell looked at the display. All readings acceptable. Avel touched the frame. Cycle again. Cell did. The door closed. A faint vibration moved through the passage. Jonas barely heard it. Avel stepped back. Stop sequence. One observer looked at the sensor panel. Pressure stable. Avel did not move. Stop sequence. Cell's ears angled forward. Reason. Lower channel resonance changed. The observer checked. Within tolerance, Avel looked toward the sanitation cart approaching from the far end, then toward Mira, then back at door 4. Stop the passage. Cell hesitated. Jonas gripped the edge of his ledger. He had promised, no arguing. Avel stepped between the door and the next cycling mark. "I am ending this cycle," Cell said. "Ren, move clear." No. The observers stiffened. Mira pressed both hands against the silver line. Avel remained where she was. Cell's voice hardened. "You are interrupting a certified sequence on an acceptable reading." "Yes." "Why?" Avel placed one hand against the lower frame. When the sanitation cart crossed door 2, this channel changed pitch. One observer glanced down the corridor. "That cart is not connected to this frame. The floor is silence," Avel continued. "The passage is transferring vibration through the lower rail." Cell checked his screen. "No fault is registered." Avel met his eyes. "Then inspect it." Cell could have refused. Jonas knew that. Avel knew it too. Mira did not move. The sanitation cart stopped. The whole passage seemed to wait. Cell finally gestured to an observer. "Open the lower plate." The technician knelt, removed 2 screws, then 4. The plate came free. Nothing. The observer looked up. Avel said, "Lift the rail." He did. A thin fracture ran beneath the lower mounting flange, almost invisible. The observer froze. Cell stepped forward. The crack extended beneath 2 anchor points. If the sequence had continued under full traffic load, the rail could have shifted far enough to misalign the next pressure closure. Not catastrophic, not dramatic, still dangerous, still real. Cell stared at the fracture, then at his display. All sensors passed. Avel nodded. "Yes, how did you hear it?" "The door did not change." Cell frowned. "The floor did." She pointed toward the stopped sanitation cart. That load crossed the adjoining plate. The resonance moved through the lower rail. Cell looked at Mira, then at the guards. Then at the observers, then back at Avel. "You were tracking the cart." "Yes." "And the door." "Yes." "And your daughter?" Avel looked toward Mira. "Yes." Cell's expression changed, this time enough. Jonas opened his ledger. He did not argue. He simply placed it on the control station. Cell looked down. 11 pre-instrument detections, dates, door numbers, manual confirmations, context notes. Jonas had written more than faults. Passing cart nearby. Ventilation cycle changed. Child crossed corridor. Adjacent door opened. Load shift in upper walkway. Cell read. Avel waited. The inspector turned pages slowly. The old report had treated those things as distractions. Jonas's ledger treated them as data. Cell looked again at the fracture under the rail, then at Avel. Resume inspection manually. One observer blinked. Inspector? Manually. Avel crouched beside the open plate. Cell joined her. For the next 40 minutes, they inspected every rail in the passage. They found no second fracture. That did not matter. The test had already changed. When they finished, Avel stood. Mira remained behind the line. Cell looked at the child. You may cross. Mira ran, not to Jonas, not to Cell, to her mother. She stopped just before reaching Avel, suddenly remembering the rules. Avel opened her arms. Mira collided with her. Jonas looked down at his ledger. The observers pretended to check their instruments. Cell let the moment pass. Then he said, Avel Ren. She looked at him over Mira's head. Your previous assessment categorized distributed attention as an uncontrolled deficit. Avel said nothing. That classification is not supported by today's evidence. Mira looked at him suspiciously. Cell continued. Your certification will be restored pending the written review. Avel's arms tightened around her daughter. And the test. Cell glanced at the cracked rail. The test will also be reviewed. Jonas finally spoke. For everyone. Cell looked at him. Jonas had already broken his promise by 2 words. He stopped there. Avel answered instead. For Tavren workers. Cell nodded. Yes. Mira looked up at her mother. Does that mean they want you? Avel made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. She pressed her forehead against her daughter's. It means I get to choose where I work. Myra considered that. Then she looked at Jonas. Better. Jonas nodded. Much? The Crown Residential Standards Office moved slowly. Buildings did not. 3 days after the certification test, Passage 14's lower rail was replaced. 5 days after that, Avel's credential was restored. 9 days after that, the Crown issued a temporary revision to Tavren competency assessments. Exclusive focus scoring was suspended. Contextual awareness could no longer be recorded as distraction unless it caused a measurable task failure. Live environmental input became part of the evaluation instead of something removed from it. Cell signed the revision himself. Jonas read the notice once, then twice. Then put it beneath the tea dispenser because the corner of the machine wobbled. Avel found it there. You are using Crown policy as furniture repair. It's excellent paper. You are impossible. So I've been told. She placed another document on his bench. Jonas picked it up. Permanent maintenance assignment. Crown Residential Block 7. Workshop allocation included. Independent token issued. He looked at her. You got your door. Avel smiled. Yes, Myra burst into the workshop. Where is it? 2 corridors east? Is it bigger? Avel hesitated. Yes, Myra looked at Jonas with immediate sympathy. Sorry, I'll survive. It has 2 windows. That seems excessive. And 3 stools. Jonas placed a hand over his heart. Now you're just being cruel. Myra ran back outside. Avel stayed for a moment, neither spoke. The repair bay sounded different without Mira's voice filling it. Jonas looked at the empty hook. Avel followed his gaze. The visitor token, she said, still on the table, still never hung. Jonas picked it up. Probably should return this. Avel nodded. Yes, he opened the drawer. Mira appeared again. Wait. She carried something in both hands, a brass token. New. Avel's name was stamped across one side. Avel Ren Residential Seal Specialist. Avel stared. Mira, where did you get that? Your office? You took my work token? Borrowed? You cannot borrow credentials. I'm giving it back. Mira walked to the wall. Jonas understood before Avel did. The child stretched upward. She was too short. Jonas almost helped, then stopped. Mira dragged the repair stool beneath the hooks. Avel opened her mouth. Jonas raised one finger, not to silence her, just to wait. Mira climbed. Jonas's old brass token hung on the left hook. The right hook was empty. The girl placed her mother's permanent token beside his. Avel stared at it. Mira, the child looked down. What? Your mother has her own workshop. I know. That token belongs there. Mira considered the problem. Then she looked at Jonas. Does she still work here? Jonas looked at Avel. Avel looked at the token, then at the shallow tray of shims she had used for weeks. She crossed the workshop, picked up the tray, set it beneath the two hooks. Sometimes, she said. Mira smiled. She climbed down from the stool. Avel did not remove the token. Jonas did not say anything. Outside, a pressure door closed somewhere down the corridor. Avel tilted her head. Jonas did too. Mira touched the brass threshold once. Then all three turned toward the sound.